Beyond the Shadows podcast.
In the darkest corners of our universe lie spaces where even the light won't go.
Places where terror and the unknown lurk, always waiting.
Join Ryan and Scott on the Beyond the Shadows podcast as we pull back the curtain and peer into the darkness.
We'll examine hauntings, true crimes, mysteries, UFOs, exorcisms, reincarnations, mysteries, and all things dark.
Join us as we go beyond the shadows.
This podcast is hosted by RPP.
If you are easily spooked, creeped, or offended, this might not be the podcast for you. Ooh. Ooh, I just want to be like... Hello, welcome back to this very serious podcast.
Hi.
Hello.
This is, I think my fridge is haunted. I'm Goody Lie.
And I'm a supreme lunacy. This is going to make
Goody Lunacy.
Goody lunacy. This is going to make no sense to people listening, but we are in full witch attire right now. I can't move my head much more than this.
You're like Trad Witch.
Yeah.
And I'm Salem Witch.
Yeah, that's right. I'm like ready to curse children, families, homes, whatever.
Good.
I'm ready.
They deserve it.
I feel like my normal laugh really equates to a witch laugh anyway, so it's fine.
We're almost at the end of the season.
We are almost at the end of the season. I'm gonna put this kindly in the background because I just feel like I'm gonna be a robot all episode. We are almost done. Can you believe it?
Yeah, it's crazy. So yeah, we need to have a band meeting and see how long we're going to take off this time.
Yeah,
because we've got to prepare for a maritime season.
We do. And of course, the whole theme of this season and our promo video, as you would have seen, our very like Ring-esque witchy video we did at the start, was to lead up until this episode where we're talking. Well, Gemma's bringing her mountain of information about the Salem Witch Trials.
Well, basically, it's the beginning of my witch trial series. So if you've been following our plague series, we've done 4 episodes on plague, and there will be more.
Oh, yes.
So this is because witch trials is huge,
Massive part of history.
yeah, and even covering the Salem witch trials. You could do a whole season on it. It's so huge. So it will possibly be 3 parts, but I'll try to keep it to 2 if I can.
Until we do the mini spin-off series.
Mini spin-off series.
A little mini spin-offs.
Yeah, because like there's just like the European witch trials were crazy. The Scottish, English, it just like... Oh my God.
It just, and much like the plague, there is just endless information.
There is so much information. So I'm just trying my hardest to wade through it all and just put it into a succinct story.
Yes, Gemma has done an incredible job, and she's been working on it like the whole time we've been doing this season and beyond, haven't you? Like,
There are so many books.
so
many. The information is ridiculous.
And she only reads so fast as well.
Well, I listen to them. I listen to them like...
Oh, of course.
All the books I listen, and then sometimes like I'll listen and type and I'll write down when interesting things have been said. I'll put like, the hour and minute number and things like that. I'm just constantly taking notes.
Yeah, exactly. It's just been baffling to kind of observe from the outside. So I'm very excited for today's episode.
I was going to start with Pendle Witch Trials because they're my favourite.
Cool.
But the Salem are the most famous.
I think that's definitely the one that everyone like recognizes first. And like you'll give us kind of like what the foundations, if you will, to understand, and then we can get into like more specific sections. I think that's
Even
great.
though they're not the first.
No.
Salem was not the first. They were, a good 200 years into the witch trial phenomena.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm excited.
In many cases, they're almost sort of at the end of it.
Yeah, that is the case, isn't it? Like, I'm talking like I know this. I don't yet, and I'm very excited to learn. Shall we start with a fact?
Yeah, let's start with a fact.
Facts from the freezer. Facts from the freezer.
You want to go first?
Mine's very, very short, but kind of tying into our possible pirate theme in the future. Ghost ships, we kind of know them, again, as a kind of fable, if you will. But ghost ships are found abandoned with no sign of crew and still occur even with modern methods of rescue, safety, and communication.
Really?
The last recorded ship to be found with no sign of life was January 2021. Yeah, I know, right?
And was it a modern ship or an old one?
It was a modern ship.
What happened?
Well, that's the question. So my theories are either
Aliens.
one, obviously, always the right answer. Two, pirates, modern pirates.
Right.
But you think
It could happen.
I mean, absolutely. You'd think like if they jumped onto a ship and they couldn't find anything valuable, that they take the crew and like hostage them, but you never hear about hostages. It's just the ship turns up with no one on it. My other theory is if it's fishing ships, those waves get pretty hectic, and
Right.
they usually. Have you ever watched that like that fishing boat show that's on TV? It's like on free to air TV. I can't remember what it's called, but like it follows.
Oh, is it
fishes.
like some kind of like Alaskan fishing adventure people or
Yeah.
something like that?
big tuna? and
Yeah,
stuff
yeah.
stuff like that. The waves are hectic, and I know they have safety of like rope, like tying themselves to the boat and stuff like that. But I can very
Tying yourself
easily.
to stuff can only do so much.
Yeah, exactly right. And then like crew comes up to see where they've gone, and then they get taken away. So I think there's a few reasons, but I didn't realize that it was still happening so modern.
And it makes sense to me though, because you know, one of the reasons why I don't love the idea of going on cruise ships is because crimes happen on cruise ships and you're in no one's jurisdiction and no
Exactly.
one wants to claim it.
International waters.
Right?
And there's nowhere to go.
Therefore, nobody wants to investigate it. No one wants to take responsibility.
Yeah.
That's why you got these stories of like people disappearing on Disney cruises.
Right.
And they're like, sorry about it. Wasn't in America. We're like,
you're actually
you know,
in between.
somewhere in the Mediterranean. You're going to have to just get off here and call the police.
Yeah, exactly right.
This is literally a crime scene. Someone's gone missing.
Exactly right. I got reminded the other day that 9-month cruise from the start of this year is still going.
What 9-month cruise?
There is literally a cruise at the moment that's doing a tour of the world that is 9 months long, and people could pay to go on this cruise. It was like $150,000 a ticket or something ridiculous. And people are going on it who work from home.
That sounds like it could just end in a complete Lord of the Flies situation to me. I just would leave that well alone.
Well, we don't
Like
know.
international waters. There's
Exactly.
no law.
We don't know. Like for the first couple of months of this year, there was lots of like TikTokers and influencers obviously on the ship and like recording video and like doing updates and things like that, but they've kind of dropped off. And then I got reminded like a few days ago, that's still
a
happening.
thing.
So it'd be very interesting in September when they like get off the
Turn up
boat.
and it's like, everyone's like, don't talk to me.
We don't talk about the 9-month cruise. We don't talk about the cruise. It's very like part of the ship, part of the crew. Like you just don't talk about it. So there you go. We'll have to investigate more ghost ships, I think, in the future.
Yeah, definitely.
What do you got? What do you got for me?
So my fact from the freezer is kind of launching straight into my story, really. So it has been widely debunked that during the Salem Witch Trials, the presence of ergot in residents' bread supply was to be blamed for the mass hysteria that caused the witch trials to begin. A theory raised in 1970 during the height of the LSD craze
Yup.
claimed that ergot, a type of mould that can grow on damp rye, was the cause of the people of Salem Village suffering a mass hallucination.
That's kind of tying into our dancing plague fact. It was like that was one of the
Things that they thought.
one of the suspected reasoning.
Yeah, right. But listen to this.
Okay.
Dr. Emerson Baker, author of A Storm of Witchcraft, argues that in many cases of ergot poisoning, delusions are synonymous with other horrific symptoms such as gangrene that may affect all extremities.
Oh my gosh.
Since there is no written evidence of amputations taking place at this time or skin turning black and people dying of sepsis, it is highly unlikely that ergot poisoning had a prominent part in causing the Salem village disaster of 1692. Okay. And don't forget, this was highly written down, like all the events. I mean, there is so much documentation about what happened.
That's like kind of unusual for our historical things. Maybe they knew at the time, they're like, this is a big moment. We need to record this. We need to write this down.
Well, or they'd be at least like, her leg is black. Witch.
Dunked.
Of the
Dunk
devil.
her. We just started watching last night. I just started watching. Was it My Lady Jane? Have you watched My Lady Jane?
No,
yet?
what is that?
It's about Lady Jane Grey of the famous,
really?
of the painting. But it's
Love Lady Jane.
Yeah, but it's like from a book, and it's like a reimagining basically of her life. And they were talking about the dunking. We're gonna dunk you, so like turn into a witch. So they kind of turn into animals in this one. It's a bit of fantasy, or they die from being drowned. So I assume we might be touching on some of that today.
The Last Tudor is one of my favourite books by Philippa Gregory, and that's about
Right.
Lady Jane Grey and her sisters.
Yeah, exactly right. So good.
She's such an interesting figure in history. Mm-hmm. So let's go to my sources. There are many.
Here we go.
The books were The Witches, Salem 1692 by Stacey Schiff, A Delusion of Satan by Frances Hill, The Witchcraft of Salem Village by Shirley Jackson. There are other books that I've got, but it's too much.
It's too much.
It's too
One page of sources, honestly.
Salem Witch Trials Documentary Archive and Transcription Project at salem.lib.virginia.edu, Smithsonian Magazine, Salem Witch Museum, and the interview with Dr. Emerson Baker, author of A Storm of Witchcraft, on the YouTube channel GBH.
Damn. Have you been to Massachusetts?
I've never been to America.
Right. Okay. I'm dying.
I've been to Pendle Hill in the UK.
Yes,
where
you
the witch
have.
trials there happened.
Was that the one with that? No, that statue you told me that was on top of the hill and it made the sounds.
The singing tree.
The singing tree. Fuck, that was so creepy.
It is one of the creepiest places I've ever been, and I went there in broad daylight.
Yeah. Yes. Exactly right. Even from like the videos you sent me, I was creeped
You
out.
knew something had happened there. It was just
Sacred ground.
It really is. And I have to tell you something weird that happened to me last night. You know how when sometimes like I will research something like a haunting or something like that and something weird will happen to me?
Yes. See our Christmas special for that.
Last night, I woke up in the middle of the night because I could smell sage burning,
Okay.
which is not unusual in my
I was
home.
going to say, not unusual, but you hadn't
I have not burned sage
for a while, I assume.
recently.
Yeah.
And I just woke up and I was like, that's sage. Like,
What is
burning sage? Like, that is so random. I ended up just going back to sleep, but I was just like, what?
Strange. Maybe they were someone was saying, thank you for telling our story.
You have to wonder.
I mean, honestly, between this and all the stuff that happened with Amityville, you've just got a little bit of a magnet for these things.
Yeah. So I was just like, hey, I'm going back to sleep now.
Yeah. Thank you so much. I'm going to sleep. Thank you.
Strange thing to wake up. Yeah.
Especially
very
the
strange.
smell. You don't want to wake up to an unusual smell.
Right. Yeah.
So
but
interesting.
not a bad, I mean, sage is lovely, you know?
Yeah.
It's a comforting, if you're like us.
Well, yeah, for us, it's definitely comforting. But it's used for cleansing. Maybe they were cleansing you now that you're doing the story. They were like, yeah, we'll just keep the bad juju away from you.
Maybe.
Okay.
I'm just going to preface this story with my immense sense of, what's the word? I'm so jaded by this story. Mm-hmm. There were no witches.
There were no witches.
Spoiler alert.
Just, women.
This is a case of people just being really, really mean to each other.
Yes, okay.
Like just terrible to each other. Mm-hmm. And I think it's a reflection of society.
Yes.
And it's got a message. Don't be a dick, basically.
Just don't be a dick.
And
don't meddle in other people's business.
Right. So it's just about a lot of crappy people, really.
Yeah.
All right, let's begin. The Careys of Charlestown. In May of 1692, a wealthy and respected couple from Charlestown, Massachusetts, Elizabeth and Nathaniel Carey, a mariner, received news. Mr. and Mrs. Carey were dismayed to find out that Elizabeth's name had been declared in none other than Salem Village. They had heard that there had been a series of allegations that had been made against so-called witches in the small farming town a few hours north of Boston, a place of no consequence but to those who live there. However, it was thought that the fuss of the past 3 months would have died down by now. After all, no executions had taken place. Surely common sense would prevail and all would go back to normal soon enough.
So that even they thought, like, this is a lot, isn't it?
It's a bit weird.
Yeah, it's a bit much, isn't it? Are we over this by now?
Yeah. But there it was. A declaration of complaint had been made against Elizabeth Carey. I have to tell you also, there's a lot of names in this story and a lot of people called Elizabeth.
Of course. Was the time.
Mr. and Mrs. Carey thought it best to travel to Salem Village themselves and to speak with whomever was in charge. It was sure to be a mistake, and after explaining that she was no more a witch than a cat or a bird, she would be unburdened of this preposterous allegation.
Understandable.
The Careys would demand justice for the slander made against their good name. If the Careys had known better, they would have fled Boston altogether and made for New York. Mm-hmm. There they would be safe from all talk of witchcraft and people making deals with Satan.
So not even that far away, they weren't even dealing with this. Not a thing. Okay.
No. For the Dutch settlers in New York laughed at the prospect of witches.
There you go.
They would risk their property being claimed by scavengers while they were gone, but at least they would have their lives. Apparently, none of this good advice was heeded by the Careys. Such was their insistence of working this mess out with the Puritans of Salem Village.
Yes, let's reason with the Puritans.
You can't. So off they went. A tiny rural town settled a mere 6 decades ago, Salem Village, not to be confused with Salem the town, was the residence of several prominent families, along with their servants, slaves, and children. It had an inn and a meeting house used primarily for church services, as well as farmland scattered around the town's centre. The townsfolk were hard-working and self-sufficient. They kept mostly to themselves, except for when business prompted the more important men of the village to Salem, Boston, or even New York. On the 24th of May, 1692, Elizabeth and Nathaniel Carey arrived in Salem Village. Now, a couple of my sources say it was the 24th of May, some say it's the 28th of May.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter. It was May.
It was of May of this year.
And they attended some of the examinations of accused witches that had been taking place almost daily at the meeting house for the past few weeks. By the end of the day, they had begun to regret their journey and instead wondered if the people of Salem Village had descended into madness.
Yeah, understandable. Imagine them turning up like, oh, this is not what was on the postcard.
Quick, go.
They don't know yet.
What they saw was a crowded room of onlookers facing a sort of jury or panel of men, demanding of each accused brought before them to prove that they had not signed the devil's book.
Oh, that's right, the book.
Any answer the women gave as to their innocence was scoffed at before they were plied with more questions. Mm-hmm. Oddly, the accusers of these apparent witches did not sit quietly and wait their turn to speak or give evidence. Rather, the group of young girls were let to wander the meeting house at their own will. Stranger still, if they were touched or encouraged to sit down, they descended into screaming fits.
Whoa, okay.
It's hectic.
That is hectic.
The whole thing is hectic, and the carries are like,
is this normal, y'all? Is this what we do? Is this justice? I don't
and
think
these
so.
are the people that they want to talk sense with.
Right.
Other times, the girls would suddenly point and screech that they could see some spectre that clearly was not there, or that the accused was not sitting in front of the magistrates, but instead of the beams of the meeting house,
Oh,
staring down at them all.
okay.
Later, Mr. Kari wrote of his experience, quote, "The minister began with prayer, and I observed that the afflicted were 2 girls of about 10 years old and about 2 or 3 other of about 18. One of the girls talked most and could discern more than the rest." So that's a big red flag.
Yeah. First red flag of the day. Actually, maybe the 5th. We'll see.
So many.
Sorry.
The prisoners were called in one by one. The prisoner was placed about 7 or 8 foot from the justices, and the accusers between the justices and them.
Oh, okay.
The prisoner was ordered to stand right before the justices with an officer appointed to hold each hand, lest they should therewith afflict them. And the prisoner's eyes must be constantly on the justices. For if they looked on the afflicted, it would either fall into their fits or cry out of being hurt by them. After examination of the prisoners, who it was afflicted these girls, they were put upon saying the Lord's Prayer as a trial of their guilt. After the afflicted seemed to be out of their fits, they would look steadfastly on one person and frequently not speak, and then the justices said they were dumbstruck. And after a little time would speak again. Then the justices said to the accusers, "Which of you will go and touch the prisoner at the bar?" Then the most courageous would adventure, but before they had made 3 steps would ordinarily fall down as in a fit. The justices ordered that they should be taken up and carried to the prisoner, that she might touch them. And as soon as they were touched by the accused, the justices would say, "They are well."
Okay.
Thus far, I was only as a spectator. My wife was also there part of the time, but no notice of her was taken by the afflicted,
Okay.
except once or twice when they came to her and asked her name. Now, isn't that interesting?
Just for a name.
That the person that has been accused
Yes.
and speaking to the magistrates
Yes.
would make them fall into fits, but an actual accused person that they knew the name of
Yes.
and had declared as a witch, but when they saw her in real life but didn't know who she was,
Yeah.
no fits.
No. Okay, it's a bit clearer to me now. I was a little bit lost for a second there, but interesting.
Regardless of what they had seen at the examination, Mr. Carey asked one of the magistrates later if he could speak to the girl who had named his wife. Surely there was a mistake. Mr. Carey gave the man their names and told of how they had travelled from near Boston to clear their name. He said that they would wait at the nearby Ingersoll's Inn, where they would talk to the girl and clear this whole mess up.
Very
The man
trustworthy.
agreed to bring the girl to the inn presently. So they go off to the inn. An hour later, Mr. and Mrs. Carey were drinking tea at the inn when the doctors opened. Sorry, the doctors were not there.
The doctors.
There are no doctors.
Oh my God, it's all crossing. There's no doctors.
An hour later, Mr. and Mrs. Carey were drinking tea at the inn when the doors opened and chaos entered in the form of all the afflicted girls from the meeting house that day, screaming and pointing and clawing their faces in torment.
What the fuck?
How convenient.
Yeah, how very, very convenient.
They threw themselves on the floor and kicked over the Careys' table, breaking the teacups as they went.
Rude.
This was all the work of Mrs. Carey, they proclaimed, who was a witch and should surely be sent to prison for tormenting the young girls of Salem Village.
She's been there for 2 seconds.
And they've seen her all day
Yes.
and nothing happened.
Yeah, exactly.
Magistrates also appeared at the inn and demanded that Mrs. Carey go with them for a preliminary hearing at once. A warrant was produced as follows. Mr. Thomas Putnam and Benjamin Hutchinson, both of Salem Village yeomen, complain of Elizabeth Carey, the wife of Captain Nathaniel Carey of Charlestown Mariner, on behalf of their majesties for sundry acts of witchcraft by her committed upon the bodies of Mary Walcott, Abigail Williams, and Mercy Lewis, all of Salem Village, whereby great hurt and damage is done them, and therefore crave justice.
Whoa, okay. She's been here for 2 seconds and they were like...
This is the pre-intro, by the way.
Oh my God. The scapegoat, straight away. Wow. They move fast when they want to.
They move fast. They are but one mind. Mrs. Carey was quickly found guilty that afternoon, much to her surprise and horror.
I would too.
Now, it's interesting here to note that she is Mrs. Carey, not Goody Carey.
Oh, okay.
So, more people of the working class were known as good men and good wife.
That's right.
If you had some wealth and status, you were Mr. and Mrs.
Okay, I didn't know that.
So, if you were just a farmer,
Kind of commoner, maybe?
a kind of like, you know, around sort of just above peasant status, really.
Yeah.
So I'd be Goody Lie, you would be
Yeah.
Goody Lunacy.
Yeah, cool.
But Mrs. Carey, she has some wealth and status.
Yeah, so
and
then-
thank God she did.
Yeah, well, I was going to say it might save a life, hopefully.
So they're at the inn, and an enslaved man, John Indian, who lived with one of the local families, the Parises, told the judges that he had known all along that she was a witch, and he himself began fitting and pulled Mrs. Carey roughly to the ground with him as he fell.
Drama queen.
When Mr. Carey went to help his wife, he was quickly removed from the room and warned that if he tried anything further, the same fate would come to him. Mrs. Carey was taken to prison, a dark, cold, unforgiving place where accused witches had died before her arrival. When Mr. and Mrs. Carey received word from friends in high places that Elizabeth Carey would be released, Mrs. Carey was so angry that she wished to stay and prove her innocence. So she's still not getting it.
Girl, leave.
They talked her into fleeing with them out of Salem Village, out of Salem, out of the state even, to New York.
Yeah, good God, girl. Get a grip. Get out of there.
Get a grip, get a flight.
Yeah. Get a carriage. Get out of there.
Little did Elizabeth know that what was to come and what may have happened to her had she not escaped Salem Village, and the sad fates of 20 others who had also been accused. It was actually 25, but we'll get to that later. So, let's go back.
I'm enthralled now. I've got to find out, guys. Wild that she was like, no, I want to prove myself. For who? For what?
A lot of people wanted to prove themselves.
Yeah,
they
it's all
couldn't do it.
about honour, isn't it? It's all about that honour.
Yeah, clear your name.
No thanks.
So when did the first Puritans move to New England? Well, they came to New England in 1629 and wished to create a haven where they were free to practice their religion as they saw fit.
Okay, fair.
The Puritans, as we have discussed before in the Great Plague of 1666, were extremist Protestants. They could not abide Catholicism or the Church of England and any form of religious extravagance. So you're not going to find like golden statues,
No, the carved
elaborate
seating
things
or anything like that.
Exactly. They didn't even have any musical instruments, although they were allowed to sing psalms.
Oh, well, good. That's, great for the creative process, isn't it?
They believed that they should be allowed to translate the word of God and not a priest. So it was more like grassroots
Right. More of
Christian.
Yeah. More of the collective rather than leaders.
Right. And they lived to a strict rule of piety, simplicity, and obedience. So what was life like in New England? So life in Salem Village was extremely dull.
Yeah, I can imagine hearing what their vibe was.
Is boring.
Is boring. Simple.
The area had been cleared for farming some 60 years ago. However, there was no end of work to be done on the land and in the home. When they weren't creating wool on a loom, they were stitching, making clothing, cooking, cleaning, looking after younger children, and at the very end of the day, they were praying.
Yeah, of course.
So it's a busy life, but it's boring.
Yeah, dull.
The homes were small and dark. Very few homes had glass windows as it was so expensive, so shutters were installed which were to be closed at night time, leaving the home pitch dark and probably quite smoky because the fire would be on,
Fireplace, yeah.
which had to burn in order to keep them warm. Puritan life was rigid in its expectation of each citizen and its monotony. All forms of entertainment were forbidden.
So sad, isn't it?
Even dolls were not allowed, as they represented idolatry and also the voodoo dolls of distant cultures, made only to cause harm and to invoke the power of Satan.
Of course.
So nothing good could come from a doll.
Oh, I say that every day. And I'm always saying that.
Theatre was out of the question.
Yeah, of course.
So, you know, I think the opinion was like, why would someone wish to escape into a story when Puritan life was by definition the most perfect lifestyle of all?
The most holy thing you could do is live by the word of God, I assume.
Right.
Nary a pantomime at Christmas, is there?
Nothing. I don't think they celebrated Christmas.
I was going to say,
even Easter, Christmas, not a thing.
No, none of it. Wow.
The only thing that came close to entertainment or any form of mental stimulation was Sunday church services. And by that, I not the very long sermons, because they would actually have 2 long church services in a day. So they would have the Sunday morning, would go for about 3 hours, and then they would have one in the afternoon as well.
Whoa, Sunday.
Yeah.
God's day.
And during these services, if you fell asleep, it was a punishable offence. And not turning up at all was practically a scandal.
Yeah, right.
The best parts of church day was the 3 or so hours between morning service and afternoon service, where people who lived too far away simply stayed in town and chatted while they waited for the second sermon to begin.
The socialising. Just
Exactly.
the small amount of socialising.
They've got nothing to do. It's the Sabbath day, so they're not allowed to do any work.
True.
So what do? They gossip.
They yap. Having a yap. Having
Right.
a yarn.
All forms of gossip took place at this time.
Yes, the best part.
Who looked especially nice that day? Who looked especially bad? Who was with child? Who had miscarried?
Oh.
Who was to marry? Which family was feuding with another family? Whose kidney pie had caused illness that week? And who dared to wear a red dress in town?
Scandalo. Oh my gosh.
News from outside of Salem Village was not especially of value unless it carried word of visitors incoming or the threat of war.
Fair.
So they're insular.
Yeah, very, very insular.
In any case, the residents of Salem Village rarely had need to travel outside anyway. At the very least, there were no suitable roads, and it would take 2 to 3 hours to get to Salem, which I looked it up. It's like a 20-minute drive.
Oh.
It's not far.
Not far, but having a little stroll, not quite the same.
Probably takes about a day or 2 to get to Boston at this point.
Damn, right. So
Yeah, and I looked that up. It's about a 3-hour drive.
Okay.
It was hard enough for some families to get to church if they lived on the outskirts of the village. Add to that snow or rain, And it was near impossible to get any place with any form of haste. So everywhere it's slow.
Are they just like walking, or is there horses involved?
I think it's a
Carriages?
mix.
Oh,
I think it's going to be a bit of a mix. Not everyone is going to be able to afford a carriage. So I think a lot of them would just be walking.
Yeah, damn.
And it'd be muddy and
Yeah, especially you said snow and rain, like, and you have to go.
and you have to go.
There is no getting around it.
They literally had scouts go around the houses to see who had not gone to church.
Oh my God, so you can't even be like, I'm sick. They're like, get up and go.
Right?
God will fix that.
Yeah. Thusly, young girls within the village had little to look forward to except for their wedding day, a reasonably successful and or handsome husband, and any children that they may have in the future.
Thrilling. What a thrilling life.
Nothing good. In this instance, we see that it's easy for the girls in this environment to find wonder and some form of entertainment in the stories told by an enslaved woman named Tituba,
Okay.
who lived in the Paris household and whom was the partner of John Indian, who was the person at the inn who had the fit, and he said, I
Right.
saw her all along, she was a witch.
Yeah.
So Tituba was believed to be a West Indian woman, although not much is known about her apart from that. The girls who congregated at the house delighted in Tituba's stories of her country and of the superstitions and the magic that they believed in there.
It's giving the movie The Witch. Like, it's just, I'm just seeing that kind of imagery.
Yeah. She taught the girls how to crack an egg into a glass of water, and the shape that the egg took would tell their fortunes, in particular what kind of man they were destined to marry. So they loved that. The girls would be transfixed by Tituba's ways, and soon the Paris home was filled morning after morning by young girls from the ages of 8 up to 19. It was the place to be, to hear the news, to secretly laugh and play and take a moment away from the dreary, unchanging Puritan farm life.
Girls find a way.
They find a way.
We find
People
a way.
find a way.
Yeah, that's right.
And the adults thought that Tituba was just teaching them how to cook and keep house.
Oh, well, great.
So they had a cover story.
Yeah.
The girls knew that talk of magic was forbidden, but that was what made it so much more interesting.
The taboo.
And interesting things certainly were soon to become.
Oh, there's, definitely not a lot of interesting things going on, is there?
So let's take a step to the side for a second. What makes a witch?
Okay, let's define it.
What are the rules? So in The Witchcraft of Salem Village by Shirley Jackson. Now, Shirley Jackson, if you'll remember, Haunting of Hill House,
Yes.
wrote that.
Yeah, right. Icon.
Yeah, awesome.
Horror icon.
The Witchcraft of Salem Village is such a good book. It's
Yeah.
like The Delusion of Satan by Frances Hill was extremely dull, but like full of information.
Yeah.
But Witchcraft of Salem Village, it's written like a novel, so
Cool.
it's kind of more fun.
Oh, I'm going to have to do some more borrowing.
Quote, "The witch must be examined in the correct legal manner and questioned with regard to her crimes. In the first cases, the accusation was the tormenting of the girls. In later cases, the witches were accused of a wide variety of demonic acts ranging from destruction of property to actual murder. The girls in question are known as the afflicted or the accusers."
Right, yes.
So the girls having fits on the floor.
Yeah,
They're the
yeah.
afflicted.
The afflicted. The afflicted, yeah, right.
They are called the afflicted due to the presumption that their fits and behaviour of an ungodly nature were the result of affliction by a witch or witches. There were two ways a witch could be found out. They could either confess to signing the Devil's Black Book, which contained the names of all of his followers. She was then pressed to detail midnight masses with him, where singing and dancing were encouraged, activities that, to be sure, were only taken part in by those consorting with Lucifer.
Of course.
No singing and dancing.
No dancing.
The second way she could be found out was when evidence was given by no less than 2 witnesses.
Of course.
And the best evidence witnesses could give was called spectral evidence. Spectral evidence occurred when a spectre or ghost-like figure of an accused witch appeared to an afflicted person.
Okay. So that's why they were just saying about seeing spectres and ghosts and things.
Right.
Yeah,
yes, because it strengthens their case. Mm-hmm. The witch may not be aware that she is a witch or that her spectre is going around town.
Of course.
However, if her spectral image appears to the afflicted, she is a witch nonetheless.
But of course.
Because, as the judges declared, only a person in league with the devil could create a doppelganger or ghostly form of themselves to torment others.
Oh my God. Yeah. I'm laughing now, but at the time it must have just been like,
It's ghastly.
But of course.
Right, yeah. Now, what if the accused says that she has no idea of any meeting with the devil or signing his book?
What do you do?
Believe it, right?
Yeah.
No. That was quite bad for her because it meant that her spectral image had consorted with the devil and signed his book on her behalf.
Oh, but of course. Oh, so
I hate when that happens.
I hate when that happens. When I make deals in my sleep. There's no winning for these women. Like,
Yeah.
no
You wake up,
winning.
you're like, I bought a house. What?
Oh my God.
Another form of spectral evidence came in the form of witches' familiars seen by the afflicted. These could include cats, large dogs, snakes, or even small birds that they claimed fed from teats upon the body of the accused. They're called witches' teats.
Right. So that's where that comes from. That
Right. And they were searched for by the magistrates or people employed by the magistrates. And they could include any moles, birthmarks, or blemishes, proving that this was where the familiar fed from.
Oh, of course. I would be screwed.
Well, often the afflicted would claim that the familiar would suck from between the witch's fingers.
Oh,
Like if it's a little bird, like it would, yeah, that's where your teats are apparently.
Oh, okay.
But listen to this. But considering these women were used to hard work, including stitching, it would not be hard to find such a mark and have the accused sent to prison forthwith. You can't win.
There's no winning, and I think that's the point.
I think that's the point. The accusations begin.
Okay.
So let's talk about some of these girls that would gather in the kitchen with Tituba. They all came from prominent families within the village. Mm-hmm. Elizabeth Parris was the youngest. She was the daughter of Samuel Parris, and he was the minister in the village.
Right, so a bit of a big deal.
Yeah, a bit of a big deal. He was not a particularly well-liked man, as he was formerly a businessman, and he was seen as ambitious.
Oh.
Can't
have that.
Yeah. I think he was also in some sort of pay dispute as well. He wanted to be paid more.
Oh, right. I see.
Not super popular guy.
Not well liked.
Elizabeth, his daughter, was very devout, and at just 9 years of age, she was the youngest of the group of local girls who met in the Parris family kitchen. Her cousin, Abigail Williams, 11, also lived there. Anne Putnam, who was 12, she is a big part of this story.
I think I know that I've heard that name.
Yeah.
Yeah.
She was a strong-willed, bossy, and sometimes mean girl who led the whole group.
12-year-old girl.
And she's 12.
Hello.
With many of the other girls, even the older ones, unwilling to challenge her. Mary Walcott, who was 17, followed Anne and tried to copy her, although she was 5 years older. Mercy Lewis wasn't afraid of Anne, but she also wouldn't challenge her.
So Anne's our like Regina George in the story,
She
if you
is.
will.
She totally is. Other girls in the group included Elizabeth Hubbard, Elizabeth Booth, Susanna Sheldon, and Mary Warren. Now, Mary Warren lived with a senior local man named John Proctor, and she was one of his servants.
Right.
Anne Putnam had threatened Elizabeth Parris, little Elizabeth, on one of these meetings in the kitchen not to say a word about Tituba reading their palms.
Understandable.
Elizabeth, now a lot of times in like the textbooks they call her Betty.
Okay.
Sometimes they call her Betty, sometimes they call her, I just call her Elizabeth.
Yeah.
Now, Elizabeth was a devout child and held her father, the local preacher Samuel Parris, in high esteem. It was possible that she would tell on the others for practicing magic, in which case they would be in huge trouble. It is understood that Minister Parris was fond of Elizabeth in return, although it has been said that children existed in those times mostly as a source of free labour.
Yeah, well.
And because you had to have them.
Well, yes. Definitely a need, but also, like, they're young and energetic.
One night in January 1692, Samuel Parris was awoken by his daughter Elizabeth screaming. She appeared to be having a night terror, but when he took her in his arms, she seemed not to recognise him at all. Furthermore, Elizabeth continued in fits of shrieks, and sometimes her body would stiffen unnaturally. She yelled that there were monsters in the room. For the next few days, when she was not in fits, she was sleeping. Minister Parris was at a loss as to what could be possibly ailing her. He called on the local physician, Mr. William Griggs, who was not a particularly learned man. He could read but not write, and he was a man of superstition.
Oh, perfect person to be a practitioner.
Well, after prayer did not seem to cure the girl, and after prompting by Minister Parris as to what was the matter with his child, Mr. Griggs informed him that it would appear that Elizabeth, regrettably, was bewitched.
Of course.
News spread around the village quickly, as it would.
Oh, yep.
They loved it.
Nothing else to talk about.
The Parris child was afflicted, and there was a witch among them. That meant the devil had visited. Any one of them may be tempted into conversing with him. Drastic action must be taken.
So, of course.
They've got a no tolerance policy.
No devil tolerance policy.
When news of the bewitchment reached the Putnam house, Anne Putnam also fell into fits.
Okay, this is very strange with the physical part of this as well.
It is somewhat suspicious, though, that when Anne was told that Elizabeth and Abigail were having fits, she
was
also
like,
fell into fits.
Me too, though. Me too.
Anne Putnam, after all, had been the one to threaten little Elizabeth Parris should she tell her father about the fortune-telling in the Parris kitchen. If Elizabeth was now afflicted, it must only follow that Anne is too.
Yeah.
The alternative would be that Anne herself was accused of witchcraft by taking part in magic.
You know.
The answer is simple to Anne. Throw everyone under the bus.
Oh my God, she's savage.
She's a quick thinker. Soon after to follow in hysterical fits was Abigail Williams, Elizabeth's cousin, who lived with her at the Parris house. Very shortly after, all of the other girls fell into fits. Samuel Parris invited a group of ministers from neighbouring towns to gather with him to discuss the mystery at hand and how they should handle it.
Got like a think tank.
Right.
How do we solve this witch problem?
Exactly. As the ministers spoke gravely, Elizabeth and Abigail suddenly burst through the door and ran through the congregation, throwing over furniture and shrieking loudly. The ministers were dismayed.
Dismayed, yes. Good.
Some were even scared. This behaviour was highly unusual for good Puritan young girls.
It's not what children do. No. It's probably the most fun they've had their whole lives.
Yeah, exactly. John Proctor proclaimed that whipping his afflicted servant, Mary Warren, seemed to be working for him.
That'll work out, yeah.
Later, when the ministers had recovered from the morning's outburst, a group of other afflicted girls were brought to the Parris house. Their families hoped that the presence of holy men may help calm the girls. Instead, the girls rolled around on the floor, screaming in terror and causing havoc. Abigail threw herself into the fireplace.
Whoa, okay, well that's too far, Abigail. That's too far.
The men concluded the meeting with a prayer and disbanded quickly. Let's get out of here.
Just throw in a quick prayer, boys.
We gotta go.
All right, we're out of here.
A neighbour, Mary Sibley, suggested to John Indian, Tituba's husband, that they make a witch's cake in order to single out the witch who was terrifying them all. John made a plain flour cake, including urine from one of the afflicted girls, and fed it to a dog.
Okay.
Fight witchcraft with witchcraft, I guess.
Yeah.
The irony, right?
The sweet irony.
Stupid irony.
We're going to solve this witchcraft. Put some urine in that cake, would you?
Feed it to that dog. So it was thought that the dog would point them in the direction of the witch.
Yep. That makes sense to me.
Although the dog's reaction is lost to history, Minister Paris found out about the witch's cake and became furious. However, Minister Paris was convinced that should the witch stay hidden, they were all doomed. So he's like, what do you do?
What do we do?
He gathered the girls together and demanded to know who was afflicting them. Anne Putnam told him calmly that she was not afflicted at all and that she was absolutely fine. Moments later, she fell to the floor screaming and rolling around.
Okay, right.
When Paris picked her up, her body was rigid, her teeth were clenched, and her eyes staring into the distance. She proclaimed that she would never sign the devil's book and begged him to help her. "Please help me," she yelled. "Stop them from hurting me." It was then that Paris noticed a bite mark on her arm. She was being attacked.
Okay.
He demanded to know of the other girls if they knew who was attacking Anne. Abigail spoke up that she thought she had seen someone bite Anne.
I might have seen someone like just chomp down on her arm.
And then the other girls agreed.
Oh, of course.
Anne seemed to wake from the fit at this point and says she can't be sure, but she thinks she might have seen someone. Mr. Paris urged them to tell him who the witch was, and they all began screaming together. Samuel Paris noticed that throughout all this, Elizabeth Paris was sleeping in the corner. He went to her and she whispered, "Tituba."
Okay, I see.
He repeats, "Tituba." And the girls all begin screaming, "Tituba did this. It was Tituba."
Right.
Mercy Lewis then calls out, "She is not alone. There are others with her. Sarah Good, Sarah Osborne, Tituba."
Throw them all under the bus.
That's where we're going to leave the Salem Witch Trials for today.
Okay.
That's just our intro.
Oh my God, I'm foaming at the mouth for more. You've written this so well.
The greatest compliment I've ever had.
Foaming at the mouth.
Thank you so much.
Wow. That was so good. Talk about immersion.
It infuriates me that no one could see the words being put in people's mouths.
Like teenage girls, they just parrot each other or go, if I can't get, like, I don't want to get in trouble, that person, everyone goes, yeah, it's that person. Like, it keeps swapping, like, it just throwing each other under the bus. Like, this is Mean Girls. Like,
they have all these little ways of giving each other messages, like whether it's kind of like with their eyes or pointing or yelling and things like that, or saying my arm's been bitten, so is mine. Oh my God.
Oh my God.
It reminds me of, do you ever watch 60 Minutes and they interview like the victim of a crime? Mm-hmm. They put words in their mouths. They do this over and over again. They go, "Did you feel victimized? Did you feel angry?
Did it invoke a sense of, like, anguish? Yes."
And they're like, yes, it did.
Yes, it did.
It's
Yes,
like,
it
who
did.
are you interviewing here? Like, or are you just, they're putting words in their mouths. And it's a similar thing that's happening here. They're putting an idea out there for someone to grab and say, oh yeah, totally. That totally happened.
Yeah, absolutely. And for a time when there was just nothing going on except for, work, go to church, sleep, die. Like, that was it. Teenage girls who are desperate for anything to cling on to, something interesting to happen. Mm-hmm. this is the perfect
They're
opportunity.
taking anything that they could get.
Yeah. And maybe not considering, like, because this is the start, like, what actually is going to end up happening after, like, once the hysteria. And like, the men are just as bad. They are just as dramaful and, like, just the drama of it all.
Completely. Samuel Parris, the minister, he completely believes in witches, and he throws himself into condemning any witch.
Yeah.
And
white knighting his way through
Yeah.
being the hero. Yeah.
right.
That was awesome. Thank you so much. I'm just like, I can't wait for the next one.
No problem.
I love that it's almost like slice of life for this time, like actually getting to picture and see what's kind of going on instead of just, you know, telling us what's going on. It's really, really cool. I like it.
Thank you.
Shall we go back to our life of being Puritans? Shall we go back to the farm now?
Absolutely not. I'm going to take my lattes and my Netflix
I'm going to take my iced latte
and my internet
and be done with
and
it
my
all.
YouTube, and
Yeah.
I'm staying right here.
That's right. I'm going to come back to the fridge. No, I don't want to go. These hands have not seen a day of hard labour. I'm not interested. Okay, well, stay tuned, I suppose.
Thank you. Yeah. So a bit of a short one today, under an hour.
Yes, look at us go.
Yeah. So, as usual, if you're on the train to work, have a wonderful day.
Yes, we didn't say goodnight to our people that might be driving late at night yesterday, I
Oh,
suppose.
yeah, if you're driving late at night, hope we scared you. Probably didn't scare you, we just probably pissed you off.
You were like, what?
Sorry.
Sorry. Yeah, we've had some like really good historical stories today, and a little bit of glad to be around this time era. I think now, you know, everything's
Are we
not
though?
great.
Are we?
Things aren't great. I thought of that on the way in when talking about, you know, our historical like day we're having couple of days, and I just thought I love this, but I'm sick of living through historical events. Like, to be part of a simpler time would be nice.
Yeah.
Oh, man. Well, I guess until next time,
Be creepy.
be creepy, but don't be a creep, guys.
Please don't. Just don't.
Just don't do it.
Bye.
Bye.